I have seen the ocean. I am a disabled little boy named Nereus. My mother, fearing that I would bring shame upon her and be ridiculed by others, kept me confined to our home until I was 8 years old. My only view of the outside world was the small courtyard where I occasionally glimpsed a few birds darting by, unaware of where they were headed. When I turned 8, my father passed away. Not long after, my mother remarried, taking a retired sailor from the town as her new husband. My mother was 40 at the time, while my stepfather was over 60. My stepfather asked me to call him uncle and said to me, "Nereus, come here. Let me take you out for a walk." "No, no," I replied, too frightened to move and shrinking away. "Come outside and see. There are many beautiful and interesting things out there." I confessed, "I'm ugly and crippled and I limp when I walk. Mother says people will laugh at me." As I spoke, I burst into tears. "Don't worry, Nereus," my stepfather said, raising his strong, though aging, sailor's fist in a mock, threatening gesture. "If anyone says anything, I'll give them a piece of my mind." I laughed through my tears. The next day, my stepfather took me to town. It was my first time out, and I was overwhelmed by the sheer number of people. I was so frightened and embarrassed that I kept my head down and clung tightly to his coat like a tail. "Nereus, lift your head up. What are you afraid of?" he shouted, drawing attention from everyone, especially the other children my age. "Come here and meet Nereus. He's your new friend," he said warmly, introducing me to the other kids. They eagerly came over, asking questions and inviting me to play. Winter arrived and my stepfather's asthma worsened. Many nights, unable to sleep, he would call me to help him to the stove for warmth. In his labored coughs, he would tell me stories about the ocean. "The sea is blue as the sky, and salty like salt. It is vast and deep. There are fish in the sea, both big and small, and boats on the water, both large and small." I was captivated by his stories and timidly asked, "Can I see the ocean, Uncle?" "Of course, Nereus. When you're older at 15, I'll take you to see the sea." My eyes lit up with the thought of one day seeing the ocean. As I grew older, I learned many things and became more knowledgeable. My stepfather encouraged me to help with household chores every day. Since schools did not accept disabled children, I studied with him at home, learning 5 new words and a memorized passage each day, while he continued to tell me stories of the boundless ocean. The sea is blue as... Eventually, my mother remarried again, this time to a tailor from the end of the alley, leaving me and my stepfather to fend for ourselves. His health continued to decline, but he still took me around, encouraging me to shop on my own, helping me with household chores and guiding me in my studies. Whenever I accomplished a small task, he would celebrate with great enthusiasm, praising me. "Nereus, you did so well. You've achieved something." We promised each other to go to the sea the following summer when I would turn 15. He constantly reminded me to prepare for the trip, saying, "I need to teach you everything before we go to the sea." The final winter was long and harsh. My stepfather lay bedridden, weakened by his asthma, while I navigated the snowy streets of the poor town, seeking doctors, buying medicine, and managing all household tasks. In those moments, I felt I was growing up. One spring morning, my stepfather called me to his bedside and said slowly, "Nereus, I won't make it. There's something I must tell you. A year before retiring, the doctor told me that my condition must stay away from the sea. So, today and forever, I cannot take you to the ocean. I deceived you, and I hope you can forgive me." I was deeply disappointed, having prepared for so many years only to face this. I cried as I did years ago with him. "Uncle," and that very night he, my only family, passed away, leaving me alone. From then on, I worked hard to make a living. Every time I earned money, I stood silently before my stepfather's shrine, reflecting on the meaning of seeing the ocean he had spoken of. I felt as if I were communicating with him. "Uncle, I have seen the ocean, I have seen the sea, truly I have."
The story of an hour. On a gloomy rainy day, Louise Mallard, a woman in her mid-30s, receives the devastating news that her husband, Brentley Mallard, has died in a tragic train accident. This delicate information is relayed to her by her husband's friend, who is aware of her heart condition and approaches the task with great caution. Upon hearing the news, Louise is initially overwhelmed with grief, her heart heavy with sorrow. She retreats to her room, seeking solace in solitude. As she sits in an armchair near the window, her tears begin to subside, and a different emotion starts to stir within her. Louise gazes out at the world outside, the trees now budding with fresh leaves, the sky breaking through the clouds and the sunlight streaming through. In this moment, she begins to experience a profound and unexpected sense of liberation. This newfound freedom feels exhilarating to Louise. She realizes that, despite her deep love for her husband, his death opens the door to a future where she can live for herself, unencumbered by the constraints of marriage. The prospect of living solely for her own happiness and desires, without the constant sacrifices she had made for her spouse, fills her with a joyous anticipation. Louise's emotions shift dramatically from sorrow to a delicate euphoria. She imagines a life where she is free to make her own decisions, live independently, and pursue her own dreams. This fleeting moment of personal freedom and self-realization is both thrilling and transformative for her. However, this brief taste of liberation is abruptly and cruelly cut short. As Louise descends the stairs, her husband, Brentley, who had been far from the accident and is very much alive, walks through the front door. Louise, still caught up in the bliss of her imagined future, is struck by the sudden return to her previous reality. The shock of seeing her husband alive and the abrupt collapse of her newfound freedom prove too much for her fragile heart. She falls instantly and draws her last breath. Doctors arrive and quickly determine that Louise's death was caused by a heart disease, the joy that kills. Nonetheless, they have misinterpreted the nature of her emotions, failing to recognize that her heart had been overwhelmed not by the joy of seeing her husband alive, but by the devastating realization that her brief moment of freedom was lost forever. The father who brought the lunchbox. It was already 1 p.m, and yet my father had not brought the lunchbox. I manage a factory with significant work pressure. The factory doesn't serve lunch, so I asked my father to bring me a meal, partly for cost-saving reasons, partly because my father's cooking is excellent. My colleagues had tasted his cooking and praised it highly, but in their praise I felt a trace of disdain. Indeed, disdain. My father, who only knows how to cook and endure hardships without knowing how to enjoy life. Could this be why my mother left us when I was young for another man? She could find a new husband, but I could never find a new father. It was 2 p.m. My father still hadn't arrived. With a whole day free, he should have just been cooking a bit of food. Recently, his cooking has been haphazard. Yesterday, he didn't bring any meat. The day before, he arrived at 1 p.m. On another occasion, he forgot the salt. Waiting all afternoon, he still hadn't come. At 7 p.m, a phone call came from the police station. "Your father is here with us. He's lost. Please come and pick him up." Lost? How could my father get lost? When I arrived at the police station, I saw my father still holding the lunchbox. Seeing me, he hurried to give it to me. "Eat your lunch." What was he doing, carrying a lunchbox all this way? I was on the verge of losing my temper when the police officer said, "Someone noticed this elderly man sweating and wandering around. When asked where he was going, he couldn't remember. When asked where he lived or his name, he couldn't remember that either. We called you because we found your contact card on him. Your father has developed age-related dementia. You need to keep an eye on him and make sure he doesn't wander off." My father had dementia. Only now did I realize that to bring me the lunchbox, he had wandered around all afternoon. The dementia had made him forget where he needed to go, where he lived, who he was, yet he still remembered to bring the lunchbox for his son. He had been hungry all afternoon but kept the lunchbox intact. The food was cold and unappetizing, but he held it out to me. As a grown man, I finally couldn't control my tears and burst into sobs.
The irretrievable childhood. When I was 13 years old and my younger brother was 10, on a weekend, our father took us to the circus. But just at lunchtime, a phone call came in, demanding that Dad urgently go into town to handle some business. Although we were very disappointed, we prepared ourselves mentally for the fact that we would no longer be able to see the circus. However, we overheard Dad's response, which was quite straightforward. No way, I can't go. You'll have to wait. Call back next week. Dad returned to the dining table, and Mom smiled at him and said, "Actually, this circus crew will return, dear." "I know," Dad replied, "but their childhood will never come back." Years have passed. I still remember that exact moment. It was in those serene moments that I felt the sweet taste of familial love. It's a bond that can never fade, be wasted, or be lost. It will stay with us throughout our entire lives.